What's going on, good people of the internet? It's time for OnComicsGrounds.com's flagship podcast, Panel to Panel, where a bunch of folks shoot the breeze and talk about comic books and such. We are back once again, but with not a normal episode. This is episode 63. This is comic issue 63. We will keep the number count going, but this was a spur of the moment kind of thing because we were planning on doing some things next week with Mary and Travis, and Mary and Travis are not here. While this room is normally 2/3 black, but we have decided to fill the whole pie, and with Travis not being here, we still managed to make it work. And we're going to talk about something that is very important to myself as well as these two gentlemen that are with me this evening, because frankly, for the past, 10 years? It's been 10 years since Jackson first premiered. Jackson Hyde, aka Aquaman, Kaldur'ahm, however you know him from television or from comic books. This past week finally was given a solo series. Yes, it was a mini-series, but the first premiere of his first series as Aquaman premiered this week. And I've been waiting since 2010, so it'd be almost 11 years. Where we've been waiting for this character to finally be given the respect that he deserves. But we will dive into more of that in a moment, folks. Don't forget that you can listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, YouTube, Pandora, Amazon Music, and Audible. Basically, wherever you can listen to a podcast except for SoundCloud, you can listen to us because we don't support SoundCloud. And you are able to check us out on all those locations, so make sure you do. You can follow us on Twitter at PTP_podcast, as well as the website On Comics Ground on Twitter and Instagram at On Comics Ground. All right, so as I said earlier, this room is a little different than usual because, my name is James Portis. I am here as always, but to my left, we have sort of a returning guest. Originally, he premiered as a guest on our brother podcast. Nice dumb pun on my part. Blurred Grounds, where a lot of black nerds just get together from the On Comics Ground staff and hang out and talk about stuff that we care about in regards to our perspective on things. We have writer, podcaster, and continued amazing person that just keeps doing great things. And someone I look up to a lot because he actually got to write Jackson Hyde for DC Comics a while back in Aquaman's issue 62 and 63. We have Mr. Jordan Clark. How you doing today?
Good, man. You're blowing up my spot here. Feeling.
I mean, hey, it's what I gotta give you your props, man. Because like it was crazy. Because originally you came in here like hot off the trails of your own indie work. And then out of nowhere, you slid in my back pocket after I told you I was a Jackson fan off mic and said, hey, something's about to happen. And I'm like, what do you mean? And then everything fell into place. So like, I have to give you your props on this for real.
Well, I definitely appreciate it. And thanks for having me on. This is going to be fun.
All right, definitely. And then my other guest is someone I've wanted to connect with for a long time, somebody that I look up to as the fact that he is associate director of a college. He is a podcaster. He is a writer in his own regard, Mr. Viktor Kerney, or you would know him from his podcast, MEGASHEEN, where he talks about stuff on the nerd sphere in general from the black queer lens. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I am doing fine. I like this intro, but yeah, I'm doing fine.
I'm glad I like the intros. I like giving people their props because like we don't get enough celebration of our culture because like for so long being a black nerd or even a black queer nerd was something that was scrutinized. Like being ourselves is not something that people look at, and the fact that we can come together at this table and talk about a character that means a lot to us is just amazing. Because I remember being just a kid who liked Aquaman. Like everyone made fun of me when I was a kid. I would go to my old comic book shop and would pick up every issue, even after like when Arthur died, like right before Blackest Night, trying to save Sub Diego, he died. I still was just like any type of Aquaman content I picked it up. Then Blackest Night hit, and Blackest Night was like, oh, we're just gonna kill everybody, and I'm like, oh god. Then Brightest Day happened, and Brightest Day said, not only are we giving you Arthur back, but we're giving you an Aqualad that looks like you. Because yes, he had Tempest growing up, but we're going to give you an Aqualad that looks like you, that is black like you. And that meant the world to me. And then, while yes, Jeff Johns did create him, and yes, Jeff Johns did come back in 2016 and revealed that Jackson was gay after him being in the public eye because of Young Justice for so many years. That was amazing to me, and that means the world to me. But Jeff Johns, fuck you, you're a scumbag for what you did, like on the set of Justice League, and you will not get away with that. Trust me. But in general, I have to give him respect for creating this character, because while yes, he did disrespect one of the best actors in the business on the set of freaking on Justice League, he disrespected Ray Fisher and try to cover up what Joss Whedon was doing. He did create this amazing character. And I think what matters most here is that we celebrate creators like Brandon Thomas, like yourself, Jordan, and Benjamin Percy, who've been able, and even Steve Orlando, who have been able to bring Jackson into a more positive light despite his creators' disregard for the black people in general. So, like, I want to know how, like, sort of like, I hate that cliche question of what does this character mean to you, but like, no, for real, that like statement does matter, because firstly, like from you, Victor, because I haven't heard a lot from like you, other than the fact that like, yo, you're black, you're gay, you like you love nerd shit. Like, I want to know your perspective on Jackson as a character.
I think Jackson is an interesting character just because you look back at, where he comes from, who he's been involved with. You think about Black Manta, you just think about the fact that when he just appears, he had that edge to him that was a little bit different than most of the characters. He wasn't really like a bunker or any other queer characters in DC. It was just kind of like, here's Jackson. But I think because of his family dynamics and because of, how he's been utilized in these stories, there's so much more to explore when it comes to Jackson. And I feel like that what I appreciate what Jordan did was we kind of got a little bit more heart to what Jackson was. Even though, yeah, it was 2 issues, it was a little bit more than what we've seen, or a little bit more I felt that was hard about what this character was. And then, as we saw animated, scenes with him kissing another man or what have you, it was really nice to see that. But I feel like there's a lot more to Jackson, and I hope this series will kind of give us that, besides the family dynamics and some of the drab. Because the reason I say some of the drab is I think about, as you mentioned, like Cyborg or anyone else, we always have this when it comes to sometimes male character of color. There's always a family issue, or there's always this, this I'm angry, I'm mad, I'm not really, this type of way. And I feel like we have to kind of break from that. I mean, not all of us are in that world or come from that world, or there has to be an angry situation. I will say really quickly that what I did not like about the miniseries of Justice League, the movie, was the fact that we had another Batman. To me, Ray Fisher was not Ray Fisher, but Cyborg was another Batman. The same kind of format of that, and I was like, okay, I got 2 of you now. 2 brooding, upset men. How do we move from that? So I would love to always see black men not come up that way, but I'm very interested to see where we go with Jackson moving forward.
Okay. Jordan, I know you're probably limited on what you can speak on in regards to your experience with Jackson, like because of like different things that you've signed in regards to things. But I still want to get your perspective on him as a character and what you were able to put into him when you got to put pen to paper, as it were.
Oh, for sure. Well, I think, everything that Victor just said, specifically in terms of like, for me, a few of my goals with Jackson were I really wanted him to be, 1, like very black, and 2, like queer in a way that's not like, when you think about queer characters, obviously, like, I think for so long, for a lot of comic book readers, there's just been that idea of having to read into it, like it wasn't really explicit, like it was just like, well, I guess maybe this person could be, or they're dropping hints or doing things that maybe are leading me to believe this, but like it's not an outright, it's not like, and so many of them were like, well, here's my coming out story, and then the end. Like there was no more, I mean, even when you think about like North Star, right? Like North Star got married and then that was kind of it.
Like he just disappeared. It was like a big publicity stunt, and then he just disappeared.
So for me, it was like, well, I want Jackson to because I mean, I think we're going to talk about this a little bit just in terms of his history, but the last time we saw Jackson in any kind of relationship was him not coming out to a boy that he was with, but like coming out as a superhero to this boy, and that kind of ended badly. And so I was like, I'd like Jackson to have something nice, and like Jackson to have something that was somebody seeing him for him, like his complete self, right? So like as a superhero, but also as a queer person, and also as like he's kind of caught between these two worlds. But somebody who's not judging him for anything, but accepting him for his whole self, because I felt like that was really an important thing to see, is like that acceptance, that love, right, between two people, where it's not like, oh, this is, I love you conditionally, right? Like I love this part of you, or I love that you're famous, or I love that you're this. It's like, no, I love you, period. Like I think you're really interesting, I think you're really cool, I'd like to get to know more about you. And just having Jackson in the position where like he could be himself, his full self too, because we've kind of seen him a lot have to contort himself in different ways, whether it's with the Titans, whether it's on his own. Obviously he's dealing with a lot of stuff with Black Manta being his father, and how he deals with that. And so I wanted to give him a story where he could kind of take a step forward as a hero, but also as a person, like Victor was saying, giving us a little bit more of that depth to who he is, and not just like, oh, he's mini Aquaman, or he's he's not Black Manta, but he's still got these kinds of powers. Like I wanted him to be somebody who you could see as a 3-dimensional character and kind of work that in. So I'm excited to see where Jackson goes, because I feel like there is a lot of potential for him, not just as a superhero character, but also as a symbol for people who read superhero comics. Because that was one thing that I think is always going to stick with me from that experience, is after the issues came out, people writing to me and telling me like, this was the first time that I saw myself reading a superhero comic, and these were not children, these were like grown adults who are like, yeah, I've been reading comics for like 10-15 years, and this is the first time I saw me. So I feel like that's super important to have these characters in these stories where people are able to see themselves and feel acknowledged through these characters.
Yeah, like it sounds dumb, but like when your issues that came out, it was one of those things where I had always seen Jackson written by people that weren't like us. It was like I so many thank yous to Benjamin Percy for trying, because he was limited on what he can do, because he was tasked with basically trying to dig up the garbage that was left on the ocean floor by a previous writer. Because oh boy, the New 52 was not kind to the Teen Titans. But then you have like Percy's run, where he comes in, he's like, he has to deal with the Damien problem. He has to deal with Wallace West coming into the picture. He has to deal with like Starfire trying to be like unstereotyped, but then he still made time to bring Jackson into this canon, because he had been sought after and was a big part of what made Jeff Johns want to come back. He wanted to finish that story and bring him in back in the canon, because for what was it, 5 years after Jackson's creation, he didn't exist. He was around for maybe a year before the timeline was rebooted because of the New 52. And like, yeah, there's that whole like, he was in the Flashpoint movie, and because of the Young Justice TV show, he was in the public eye. But that was one thing that was very noticeable about the Wikipedia page at that time, was that other than that little bit of spot in Brightest Day, he was never around. And that definitely left sort of an impression when you only saw Jackson or Kaldur'ahm as this stoic, like already got his shit together version of himself. But then you see Jackson as he is now, he's still learning. He has to like figure out who he is, like because in the TV show that no one knew about Zebul, no one really acknowledges that Mara is from Zebul half the damn time. No one talks about the fact that there's this whole other culture of Atlanteans that he came from, and he has to deal with the fact that yeah, Black Manta is his dad, but there's still other stories that we can look into. And what I liked the most about your story, Jordan, was you weren't afraid to touch on his Zebul roots. You weren't like you didn't make the whole thing about like what other writers do where it's only him and Black Manta and nothing else matters. It's like, no, he has a story before that. Like his mother's story still matters. And that meant a lot to me because it was like we can stop living in this world where only him being the son of Manta is the only thing that matters. And so that meant a lot to me. But in general, I'm really wondering what we go from here, because the first issue by Brandon Thomas that came out this week, please go pick it up. It definitely leaves a lot to be wondering about. I'm very much somebody who doesn't want Black Manta within 10 feet of this book because we've had stories like Jordan's, we've had Steve Orlando's book, we've had other runs that have set the framework to move past Manta. I'm really praying this is the first step of forming other stories with Jackson. And like I kind of want to get your guys' opinion on like the sort of two different like perspectives we have of him as a character from like the animated series and from now and where his potential lies, because we got that little sneak peek from Future State, but it still leaves a lot of to the unknown in terms of like I don't like y'all can go back and forth and like we can say have a dialogue about it, but in general there's two different sort of wavelengths that people will perceive him.
Victor, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is in this new book, we're gonna see how, his relationship with his mother. We're gonna see how he is in the new town or the new city. The name has just slipped my mind, but we're gonna get to see, what that looks like. Is it Amnesty?
Amnesty Bay.
Yeah. So he's gonna be able to, I guess, be regular. We'll get to see a little bit of that. I mean, of course, there's going to be some drama, and we kind of I don't want to, spoil it, but it's more of a, it's going to be some drama going forward. But I like the fact that we're going to get to see him hang out with, with his mom, and see that. And I love that his mom is going to be present in his life because, that was really there has always been, him Black Manta. So this is going to be a way maybe to see a different side, a softer side, because again, if you look back, and like even in the cartoons or so, we didn't really always get that, and I feel like that this is something that we will need to kind of flesh out the character a little bit more strongly. I mean, feel free to disagree with me if I just kind of said something totally different, but I just really think it's time that with this new series, we just get a full fleshed out queer character, especially a character of color. We need this character to be fleshed out.
Jordan?
Yeah, well, I think thinking about the two, right, the animated version and the cartoon version, like they are two very different characters. Like,
yeah,
I think part of it is with Young Justice is that Kaldur'ahm was like very much so like under Manta in different ways, right? Like his relationship with Manta, I think, is different than it is in the comics, where it's a bit more complicated, in so much as he's spent more time with him, specifically, I guess, spoilers for Young Justice when he was undercover with Manta.
Oh, it's been like 5-6 years.
Yeah. Whereas in the comics, like Manta just abandoned him and was not around, and the only time that Manta has shown up is to literally terrorize him and his family. So it's very much an antagonistic relationship in the comics, whereas I think they're not friends in the animated show, but they definitely, I would say, bonded in a way that you bond with somebody that you're spying on, I guess. But for Jackson, moving forward, specifically in this series, I think one of the things I'm hoping to see is not necessarily him breaking away from the Aqua family writ large, but more so like establishing his own circle, right? Because we kind of see him with the Titans, which is cool that he's kind of back with the Teen Titans. He was in, I believe, he was in an issue or two of Young Justice.
He
not that
was
long
like
ago.
Bendis sort of like shoehorned him in and trying to like put him with the third generation group of heroes because he didn't really fit in with Damien's crew, but I'm trying to like retcon that back, and I'm like, no, don't.
So he's got like superhero friends, and obviously like it would be cool to see him with some of the other young queer superheroes that are around in the DC universe. But even more so than that, just to see him with other young people in the Amnesty Bay area. Like I'm kind of looking around, like Amnesty Bay, I believe is in like the Boston area.
Boston or Maine, one of those.
Yeah, so a pretty white space, but I'm thinking of I'm thinking of Asheville, North Carolina, which is a place that, a lot of younger Black artists of all kinds have kind of moved to. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Moses Sumney, who's a singer, songwriter, and he lives in Asheville now. And like, there was a little video that he did of just the artist community down there. And there's like a lot of young Black, brown people, queer people doing all kinds of things. And I feel like it would be cool to see Jackson building community with other people who, are like him, not just as superheroes, but also are coming from, just a similar life perspective. Because I think one of the things that, I would have loved to have touched upon, but again, like just 2 issues and you got to kind of nail certain beats, get in and get out, is, Jackson had a weird childhood, right? Because like his mom was basically like lying to him. She in an effort to protect him, like she wasn't doing it maliciously, but she wanted to protect him from his father and like a lot of other stuff that comes with being a superhero. But he kind of was moving around a lot and kind of being isolated and shoehorned away. And even when he came out to her in the when it was revealed that he was queer, like
I think it was Percy's room, wasn't it?
Yeah, she was kind of like, oh no, like don't do that, like that's and it was more so like, no, don't do that, not because I wouldn't love you if you were queer, but more just like, I don't want bad things coming to you. She was trying to do it from a protective way. It was kind of a backwards way, but like seeing him now as he comes into his own as a young person, like getting to meet other people like him from similar backgrounds and community as him, specifically in a place where there might not be a lot of people like him, and what that journey is like. Because I feel like that's another very relatable thing for young queer kids to see, is like, yeah, like I look around and I don't think that there's people like me where I live, but like lo and behold, maybe there is. Maybe if I kind of root around a little bit, I can build a community, even if it feels like there isn't one that's possible.
Right.
And I was going to say, I'm glad that you mentioned that about the community and where it is, because you think about it, Boston area, the main area, is also racist. And so you kind of think about, like, will they even address that? Will they even pop up? And will they do it in a way that's not so typical when they try to address racism in comics? But you just, again, thinking about where this place is, and also you think about those areas, those issues are very prevalent. So I wonder if they will even address that as we move forward.
Honestly, and the thing about it is, what's crazy is you unintentionally referenced it, Victor. Bunker, and I wasn't going to say his name, but screw it. Scott Lobdell is a creator that has garnered a lot of hatred towards me as time has gone on, because while, yes, he did create a potentially compelling character, no one did anything with it. Bunker at first came off of like a bit of a stereotype, like that modern take of what a queer person should be, very feminized, very like in a certain mold of what he should be, which granted, like if you are that way, you're valid. We all have that side to ourselves, but that vibe felt very much like a caricature. From that first moment where he opens that cable car to see Tim Drake, he looks like a caricature. And after Lobdell's run, he's in the background. No one ever cares about him. And then because of the small amount of notoriety he has from the TV show, that Jackson has been able to sort of just like skate by and finally start to kind of get his footing again. Because after Percy's Teen Titans run, we didn't see Jackson for about a year. There was that entire gap where Dan Abnett took over the Teen Titans book, and Jackson was not found anywhere. Like, he wasn't in Darkness Metal, he wasn't in anywhere. And then until finally, I think it was actually a year and a half later, when Bendis did put him in whatchamacallit, in Young Justice. So it's very much like, unless you care about him, you're not going to see him. I'm wondering if David F. Walker had anything to do with that too, because of him sort of like ghostwriting the book in the background for Bendis, because of Bendis being kind of problematic sometimes, of the idea that let's put this character in here because he matters to a lot of people. And you have Young Justice on the banner, but because of the fact that the TV show is a thing, you need to at least include one of its most notable characters in somewhere. So I'm kind of glad he's there, but now it's just sort of gone back to, oh, he's friends with Beast Boy, Starfire, Raven, and Wallace West. And it's very strange. But no, I definitely love what both of you said, because, yeah, the big thing that I kind of dislike about modern comics that I've seen is that we don't really create a status quo for characters. You sort of like give them a mini or a series, and they sort of like have an adventure, and then it's over. There's no status quo that forms of like a friend group or this, or like any type of rapport with people in the town or city they're supposed to protect. But then you expect them to have grounds for a movie or a TV show again in live action, if possible. And there's nothing for a writer to pull from. Friggin' Black Lightning struggled tremendously from that, where Freeland is supposed to be a suburb of Metropolis, and they had to change so much of the base level of the show just for it to work. Freaking Naomi is going to be brought out soon, and she has no framework for a status quo for a TV show. So it's like, I'm kind of hoping that this, like you guys said, that this can be a fresh start for Jackson, that he can sort of form his roots for, if by God we ever get the opportunity to see him as Aquaman for a long period of time, that he is able to be the front man. Arthur can retire and be his own ruler, whatever they have him do. I'm kind of liking this idea that while Future State had a few bumps in the road, we can still continue that timeline and maybe change a few things, but keep the things that were inspiring to people. Because I don't know about y'all, but when I saw Jackson pull up with the full dreads and the beard and have both of his water swords at all those guards, and he's just like square up, that was one of the best moments in comics of this year. Like right there, that moment where he's just ready to go down as Aquaman, fighting or not. Like, that was the best shot of this year for me.
Yeah, I think Jackson definitely is a character that has, I think, like I said before, just so much potential. Even just if we're just talking like straight superhero stuff, right? Like, he's got these abilities that Aquaman doesn't have. He's got a little bit of the abilities that Mira has, right? Like, Mira is obviously the most advanced, with that, the water shaping. But like, as Jackson continues to grow, because he's still so young, right? Like, he's still a teenager, like he's not even an adult yet. So as he kind of continues to learn and get more and more powerful, like, he has some real potential to be just like one of these powerhouse characters who can really like wreck shit when he gets into it. And like, even in the 2 issues I wrote, like, that little moment where he kind of gives off that huge burst of electricity, like, that's just like a single little taste of like what he could possibly do as he got stronger. So I think when you look at him from a lot of different perspectives, like, there is a tremendous room for him to grow. And I really hope that he gets to stick around in various forms, whether or not this miniseries, and hopefully, I hope people are buying it and it's selling, and people who keep track of those numbers are paying attention and say, oh, maybe we got something with this. Like, maybe this is something that we could keep putting out there. Like, seeing him in different places, whether it's, part of a team book, whether it's teaming back up with Andy, whether they pick up any of the Future State stuff, in terms of jumping back into that timeline, or, whether or not they have like a Aquaman, book with him and Arthur simultaneously,
That would be kind of cool.
holding the mantle. Like however they want to do it, I think Jackson. There is a demand for the character. Like I would say that there's definitely a fan base and a large potential to grow that fan base, right? Like, there's the people that are already hip to Jackson, but then there's all the people who maybe don't know about Jackson and maybe haven't seen him in anything yet. But like, the second they get a little taste of a character like that makes it, oh, like, yeah, I'd buy that comic.
Most definitely. But do you want to throw anything in there?
No, I think Jordan kind of hit it right on the target. If they develop this character correctly, there will be continued interest in it. I think sometimes, and to jump back really quick, as a writer, your characters want a full story. Your characters want to have, when you're writing characters, they are telling you to flesh me out. They're telling you that. And so you want to do that. And I really hope they do that, because this is a great potential to really have someone in the main universe for a long, long time. But hopefully they are really fleshing them out. And that's all I really want for Jackson, is to be fully fleshed out. Yes, he could be a badass warrior, but I also want him to be just somebody who wants to, do crochet or whatever. Just do something else where we can kind of see the difference, the nuance, the different sides and shades of this character.
Well, that's why. Yeah, well, that's. I mean, even it feels weird talking about myself, but that's why.
No, it's cool.
I snuck in some Janet Jackson references, in my 2 issues, because I was like, what is Jackson into? Like, I thought it would be really cool if he was into dance and choreography, just kind of as like an extension of his powers and abilities, like kind of how all that stuff would work. So, giving him something outside of being a superhero that, he focuses his time and attention on. There's been little drops and hints to him being into, tabletop, role-playing games and, online games and, like all kinds of other things. So I think it is important to kind of like establish him as, yes, a superhero, and as somebody who can do all these cool things with their powers, but also as like a relatable young character that people could be like, oh yeah, like Jackson, I would like to hang out with Jackson. Like I'd like to if I met Jackson in real life, like we'd probably kick it, instead of him being like a terrifying, like, super person.
Right. So it's just I think that was the core thing I wanted to touch on, because like one thing that always was great about seeing him in the television show, he was just a compelling character, like in his own right. Like he was the one that chose to be, like, because rather than doing the whole first it was Garth, then it was Jackson, whatever. No, they said no. Garth didn't choose to be Aqualad. Jackson did. Kaldur did. He chose to go to the surface and be a hero, like instead of Garth. And it opened this whole different, like, what if scenario that put them on an even playing field. And even when they did the stupid the video game that like had Kree Summer come in as Tula and like try to like merge Tula's relationship with Garth with Kaldur, which was so weird. They even sort of acknowledged that later on Jackson found his path, that he was able to accept himself, and they did it so clean. Like in that season 3, they did it so clean. Like, yo, not only is his Aqualad his boyfriend, but like it's a thing, and you're gonna deal with it, and we're not gonna talk about it. It's just the norm, and you're gonna go with it. And it was so clean, and like they didn't like overhype it or over dramatize it. It was just there, and that was one of the most clean moments of representation I think I've ever seen in an animated TV show like that. And it still gets props to this day for me. I'm excited to see what happens from here, because Kaldur as Aquaman there, you never thought you'd ever get that, because of how the fact that DC has a prevalent history of never continuing their continuity. But then this past year, you see it finally happen, and you're like, wow, we actually can do something here. And I'm actually excited to see if we do get somewhere else with this. So, like the biggest thing like we kind of all agree on here is just fleshing him out. And I think the biggest thing is we need more of people like Jackson. We need more developed characters of color and also queer characters. That's the biggest thing here, because like we were talking about, Like, we haven't seen a queer book on a DC shelf since Batwoman ended, when Midnight and Apollo ended. We haven't seen a black book since Black Lightning Cold Dead Hands ended. And like, yeah, there was like the Vixen digital first books and her little animated show. That was cool, but like they didn't put it somewhere where black folks could absorb it. That's the biggest problem that I see constantly, and like what we've brought up on this very podcast before, is the fact that they try to hide their little pushes for diversity and then not do it correctly. That way, people can absorb it. So like, I kind of want to bounce this idea off of like, let's put like your guys' heads, because Jordan, you've kind of like dealt with the fact that like FOC suck, that like pre-ordering books matters, and not everybody has that book on the dime. But like, what would you suggest from your perspective in regards to not like yeah, sales do matter, but bringing more people like diverse titles, if that makes sense?
I think comics is in a shifting place right now.
Yeah, that's
when you kind of look at not only where a lot of creators are going, but also just how the industry is continued to shape and change. And I think one of the things that would help is that when you look at the kind of stories that are coming out, and specifically trying to reach a wider audience, right? Like there's a push to reach a younger audience, which is true, right? Like definitely need to keep bringing people into the medium. But I think just making comics more accessible, right? Like making them something that people know about, that people are able to find easily. It's not a whole hassle, because I remember when I was growing up, I grew up in the county in Maryland, and like there wasn't a comic book shop around me, and I lived like 20 minutes from DC, so it wasn't even like I was in the boonies somewhere. Like I was close to the city. It's just that there wasn't an accessible comic book shop for me to go to. And sometimes that's the truth for, a lot of people, is that they just can't go to their, LCS and pick up a book, or, start a pull list. So, love comic book shops and definitely want to see them continue to grow and thrive. But I think digital has a place as well in terms of making things a little bit more reachable, accessible for people. In terms of getting their comics. I also think, when you're putting these books out, what I hear often from people who are trying to get into comics is there's just a lot, right? Like there's a lot happening. There's a lot going on. There's a lot that you feel like you need to read, even like with this Jackson book, looking on Twitter, there's a lot of people like, oh man, I'd love to read this book. What do I need to read first? Like, what do I need to read?
Like, other than those couple pocket things like your stuff and Percy's stuff, there isn't anything to read first.
Yeah, well, and I think so some of the people working on the book have been like, oh, like we've tried to design this as much as possible as like you'll just get it, like you'll be able to read it and get it, and I think that's great, and there definitely needs to be more of that. But also, like, what I feel like turns a lot of people off, specifically if we want to think about like the DCU era, right, where it was like, we're gonna make this dedicated push to these books, but then we're just going to start canceling stuff, or we're going to start like shifting things around and like change direction. And if you're trying to bring people in, like you kind of have to commit to that, right? Like you can't have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because if people start coming in and they say, oh no, I like this, right? Like I think about Young Avengers that Gillian McKelvey were doing, right? Like people are like, oh, I like this, and then they canceled it, and then they didn't do anything with it, and then all those people who came in because of that book like left, because the thing they liked was gone, and you did nothing to kind of fill that void that was left when that book was gone. And so I think you really have to be cognizant about, if you're trying to intentionally court specific audiences, right? Black audiences, queer audiences, indigenous audiences, Asian audiences, whoever you're trying to bring in, like if it's a commitment to that, then you need to commit to that. You need to really make sure that you're not only having stories that are true to those backgrounds and they're reaching out to them, but also that creators that reflect those backgrounds, and then also that you're going to stick to it even if sales aren't great off jump. Another thing I think probably would help is if you maybe just did like original graphic novels, right, and like kind of just put those out as just like, here's the whole thing, right? Like, just read this. Or even, like, we're going to do, kind of like quarterly graphic novel stories that you can just kind of get, almost like manga, right? Like a manga chunk of like, here's a chunk of the story, and then you can read, the rest 4 or 5 months from now. Like, there's going to be another part of it, but like that kind of thinking to help build, because unfortunately what we have now isn't doing it right. Like, what we're doing now is not working in the way that we would like it to work, in terms of bringing in readers and retaining those readers. So things, I'm seeing a lot of different things, a lot of different things are being, tried out, but no matter what the attempt is, no matter what avenue you're trying to pursue, it's also about persistence in that. Like, you can't just say, oh, that didn't work, like that wasn't. I talk about this all the time. It's the one and done theory. Like, when you think about film, right, think about black science fiction film, right? Like, they gave us After Earth, and then After Earth bombed, and it was like, I guess black people don't like science fiction. It's like, no, we don't like bad movies. Like, we like black science. We like black science fiction. We want to see ourselves in these stories. But like, after Earth, like I can't think of the next big black science fiction film that came out. Like, they just kind of decided we didn't like that, and that's kind of how these things work a lot of the times. Is like, they take a big swing, and if it misses, then they're like, oh, I guess they don't want that. And it's like, no, we just didn't like that particular thing. But if there's more in there, right? Like, if there's more in the pool where people could say, oh, like, I like this, right? I may not like this, but I do like this, instead of like, well, this is the only thing that represents me and I don't like it, so I don't know what to do about that, right? Because if I don't support it, then you get rid of it. But if I buy it and I don't like it, then I'm spending my money on something that I don't like.
And like,
So
that's what they kind of
that's
use as
crazy.
gas to say, like, yo, hey, like, when Black Panther and the Crew didn't have 1,000,001 like pre-orders, or they have, what was that one book that Kerry Randolph did art for at Marvel? Hold on, it's gonna bug me. But like, in regards to that book, like it was like a like a black kid became an Inhuman. It was like an entire thing. It was like sideways or slideways, something like that. I don't know. But like, it was a whole thing, and once the entire shelf life of the Inhumans kind of went away, then no one cared anymore. Like, he didn't continue on like how Miss Marvel did. He just kind of hit the fan, and no one cared anymore. So it's like, it's very much one of those things where, unless you like you said, Jordan, like, unless you bank on that one thing and you don't like that one thing, then sorry, you're look. Mosaic. That's what it was. Mosaic. Mosaic was like, it was a decent book. Like, it was kind of cool, and like, even Jeffrey Thorne wrote it. Jeffrey Thorne like is an acclaimed writer and does great work, but people didn't resonate with it. And also, it was during that period where Marvel had 1,000,001 titles, so it's not like black folks were just in the know about it. So it's very much one of those things, yeah, where we didn't have the opportunity, and it didn't call to everyone. So then it's just gone. But then you see rare occasions like Black Panther, where that book has perfect immunity, where no matter how rough Coates' run got, it wasn't canceled. Ridley's run is apparently coming soon, and you better know that's not going to get canceled, because of how much money Black Panther made them. They know not to cancel it, even if it's not selling at all. They're not going to cancel it ever again. We need more immunity like that. That way, people have the time to register with it.
I agree. I agree with that. I also, and I want to jump back a little bit about what's working and what's not working. I feel like what I've seen so far is, as they try to appeal to many different audiences, you're seeing different companies like, we'll do graphic novels and do this for younger people. But I feel that the problem with that is you can't take, maybe you can't take Wonder Woman, for example, and you give a different version of Wonder Woman for kids and a different version for us and a different version for gays and a different version for the guys. Like, you can't really do that to a point where you're confused about the character. So if you're trying to bring in new people, you're almost tricking them because it's like, oh, I came in because of this version. But that's not who's on the regular, or Starfire doesn't have a child, and so who is this, and why even do this? So yeah, I feel like some of the hit or misses are not really being consistent about a character, but giving these different versions to where you're trying to scratch an itch that is not going to be consistent. So if you brought me in because of this particular situation, but you're not going to be able to keep me if you're going to give me something totally different. It's just that person we're in the face. So I feel like the problems that we're seeing is not really knowing how to market a particular character and to do that well to everyone. I want to go back to the past. When Jordan, you was mentioning how, possibly doing like graphic novels, quarterly or what have you. In some ways, in the past, we used to get like the Marvel special editions, and for example, you think about how they will tell a story about the Asgardian Wars. I'm saying that totally wrong, but how we had the special edition of New Mutants, and then an annual, and then like a very small. I think 2 or 3 episodes, but a few comics of Alpha Flight X-Men when it dealt with the Asgardians. Can't talk.
Asgardians?
Yeah. So as we are thinking of things that will work, is I think in a lot of ways, if we kind of remove the whole capitalist with part of it, we really can't. But if you can remove let's give you 12 issues, tell a story that's still not really complete. But if you will go back to the days when there was 2 issues, told the story, and we moved on to something else, that might be a thing, because you would entice people to keep going versus like, okay, it's the 8th issue, I'm already done. So
yeah,
we got like 6 more to go. One of the things that sticks out to me is when the X-Men and the Avengers and Spider-Man, wow. They got thrown back into Conan's age, where they had to deal with a sorcerer who wanted to make Manhattan go back to the Bronze Age. And so that was done in 2 comics, and it was done. And it was a big crossover when you stop and thought about it. The world was erased through to Magic and Doctor Strange, but it was able to give you the type of story that was enticing you to read more. You got to learn a lot about Celine, learn about Rachel, a lot about Storm. You got to learn a lot about these characters within 2 comics, and then you moved on. But it made you want to know more about them. I think that if we get to a place where we can do that again, that will spark interest, because you will be enticed to keep going versus I'm exhausted, in this 12 limited series situation. So I kind of wish we would go back to that. But also I really hope that as these comic companies try to, figure out what they're doing, is really figure out how to remain consistent about a character and stick with that character through the thick and the thin. A big example to me will always be Nubia. How we got Nubia in 1975, had a concept for Nubia, and that vanished for over almost 30 years before I think Phil Jimenez worked on Nubia, who was something similar to Nubia, but wasn't Nubia. And now we have Stephanie Williams, who's working on a Nubia series. So,
and on top of that, you had Ella McKinney, who came in during Future State and tried to rebuild. Because I've had conversations with Elle, and we talked about how, like on Border Grounds, where she wanted to take a shot and start building, trying to repair what the original concept for Nubia was. But then they immediately sidelined her for Yara Flor. The entire idea of bringing Nubia back into the forefront, and they had that really cool shot of her in her own Wonder Woman outfit that sold like gangbusters. Everyone loved that, but then she's put on the back burner. And thankfully, Vida Ayala's coming in a few months and doing the book. They're gonna put Nubia back on the map. But how long is that shelved?
Well, and also shout out Stephanie Williams also doing that too.
Mhm.
Yes, most
Um, so yeah, well, I think that's part of the thing too, is that when you have, we just need more, right? Like the whole thing is just continuing to bring in more and never really just kind of resting or feeling like, this is enough. Because when you look at the entire scope of comics that are coming out right now, like still not a lot of black comics and black comic creators, getting opportunities. And even though you might look at it and say, oh, but there's more, right? Because we've got, this book and that book and this one and that one, and this person's doing this. Like it's great to see. And I definitely am rooting for everybody and happy to see a lot of, faces, old and new, doing, some really interesting things. But it's also like, but that's like 3% of comics. You know what I mean? Like it's not like, oh yeah, like we really did, something new. And it's not like, oh, Marvel and DC need to be 50-50 black characters and black creators. But like I think it's that you can't just bring in 2 or 3 folks and be like, oh, we did it, like we reached the limit. It's like, no, it's like keep bringing in people, keep making these pushes. And it's not just black people, it's queer people, and it's Latin people, it's Asian people, it's all sorts of people. Like there's really so many different stories. And I think the thing about comics, and specifically if we're talking superheroes, is that for so long there hasn't been that diversity in terms of like the faces that we see on these superhero teams, but also like who gets to have their own book, right? Like it's a big deal to have your own solo title as a superhero. Like that is a stamp of approval from the publisher, but also from the fans that like, we want this, right? Like when Miles Morales had his own book, like legitimately people are like, yes, we like Miles, we want to read about Miles, right? Like that is a statement. And so when you have Jackson, if Jackson has his own book, that is the Jackson Hyde book, that's a big deal. Like that's saying something. If Nubia has her own book, that's like not, just a mini series, but like it's an ongoing series, or it's a series of graphic novels, or it's whatever it is, right? Like even digital, like I don't think digital is lesser, in the sense that if you have a digital series that it's somehow not a real comic, but like, but give us that, like give us these things where we're seeing these characters. Because I'm trying to think right now, besides we've got Jackson, we've got Black Manta, we've got yeah, we got, well, is the Vixen series still going, or is that
no, Vixen's canceled. But no, yeah, in terms of just those two, like, and then we have Nubia. We
got
have the
Nubia,
Milestone line, but that's still
right?
separate. Milestone
Yeah,
is separate from DC, and it's in its own universe. Because you know how many times, man, when I will get people who are like, "You guys got Static Shock. You guys don't need anything else." And it's like, first of all, Static Shock, Static, Icon, Hardware. We love that they're a thing. Keep making them. Bring them back. We wanted them for years, and y'all couldn't reach an agreement. But that's neither here nor there. But DC still needs to make it so the Justice League isn't a bunch of white people. Like, yeah.
well,
yeah.
Oh no, that's yeah, but that's exactly what I'm saying. Like just like even Milestone is great. Like I love everything that's coming out from there right now, but like keep that going and do more. Like it doesn't have to be a one or the other proposition. It never has to be, oh, well, you have X and like that's it. Like we did it. It's like no, like we've got X and this and this and this, right? Like
right.
keep bringing in these characters, keep building up these characters. There's so many like wonderful characters throughout all the superhero universes where it's just like they got left behind for whatever reason, right? Like there were an idea that somebody had once upon a time, and then either other creators just didn't feel compelled to keep using them, or they didn't fit into, a publishing line or whatever it was. But it's like they're still there, like they still exist. I'm looking at Wallace West right now, and I'm just like, I'd read a Wallace West.
See, okay, that's an interesting. That's an interesting topic to sit here and talk about, y'all, for me, because I talked about it with the folks on Blurred Grounds before. But Wallace is a different problem with diversity, where he was brought in to be in the New 52 a race change, and then when he came in as a race change was so drastically different from his original version. Like nothing was comparable. He was not the same age as the rest of the Titans. Like not the same age as Nightwing or Donna or anybody. And then because of the backlash, they brought back White Wally, and everyone was kind of like, "Hey, they're cousins," because like interracial relationship somewhere in the family tree, and everyone kind of just side-eyed it, but left it alone. And Wallace has just been kind of riding the coattails of, "Hey, I like to drag race, and I have no other personality or traits besides I'm a hot-headed black kid." And I kind of want to get y'all's perspective as writers of like what we should do with this.
The same thing you do with Jackson, where you like flesh him out, like give him something to do. Like I don't think Wallace is a bad character or a lost cause or something that should be thrown away. I think Wallace has potential to really, be fleshed out and created. Same thing with Duke, right? Like Duke kind of comes and goes sometimes as necessary in the Batman books, and then
Right.
he disappears for a long time, and then they give him a 3-issue miniseries, and then he's gone again. And it's like, well, like let's see Duke. Like, what's Duke about? Like, I'd like to see whether he goes back to the We Are Robin days, or like we kind of spin him out and put him in his own city somewhere in the DC universe and let him do his thing. Like, these characters all have merit. Like, there's no. Yeah, like I'm not gonna go the there's no bad characters route, because I've seen some characters and I'm like, I don't know about that, but
Yeah.
but I think for a majority of characters, it really is just like, well, what are you willing to do with them? Like, are you willing to actually put the time in to flesh them out and develop them and give them something, right? Like really allow them to be who they are. Because I think Wallace got a raw deal because of how he was introduced, but I think Wallace isn't a character that like doesn't merit like more time and attention and space in comics. Like I'd like to see, a Wallace miniseries where he was able to just kind of like go out on his own, for a few weeks and kind of see what he's about, so we can really see him away from the Teen Titans and away from the Flash family and all that stuff, and just kind of who he is on his own, and then reintroduce him back into that world with just more meat on his bones.
Okay, Victor, I want to see your opinion on that.
Well, I'll just say, as writers, and if anybody who's listening are writers, that is the goal, is to try to make this character realistic as possible, or have some pieces of realism in them, to where they're not just like, they're not a Wolverine. Wolverine over the years, we know a lot about Wolverine. Yeah. He's just a killing machine. I think as writers, we have to make sure that even your villains, you flesh them out. I know when I've worked on a villain, I didn't want a particular character to be a villain per se. I wanted this person to be, they're psychotic, but they had a reason behind their madness. Like the reason behind the madness is because they believe in this, and they believe in it so much they're willing to do whatever they need to do, or they take the full meaning of who they are. Like to say, like if you are, oh, I'm a witch. I'm going to take the full advantage of me able to do whatever I want and do it, versus, oh, I need to follow the rules of life and death and, birth and rebirth. You really take those opportunities to kind of build out who they are, whether they're good or bad or confused or manipulated. You do what you can to make a character more than what it is. So I will say, anybody who hopes to get into DC or Marvel, think about who you want to write and how you want to write them. Why do you want to write them, and why do you want to take them to another level, and how will you be able to do that? I think those are things you have to ask yourself when you are getting involved with characters that are already grounded, or you are creating new characters. That how do you really want them to be kind of multifaceted in so many different ways?
Yeah, well, and I just thought of what Christopher Priest was doing with Wallace in his Deathstroke run. And I was like, yeah, that was kind of interesting. Like, I like to see more of what was going on there. Like, that again, there's just like moments where you just take a character in a slightly different direction, or you add a slightly new wrinkle to, you know, what we know about them, and suddenly you've got an interesting story. So it's not like it would take a lot. It would just take some intentionality in terms of like actually trying to put more behind Wallace than just kind of he's like Wally but black.
Honestly, like, that's what he just has been the past like 10 years. That Wallace has been a thing, because Wallace came out like when the New 52 came out and just kind of sat there and was black because like dude from the TV show was black, and that didn't really do anything. And that's my biggest complaint. It's like either do something with him or put him in a different universe. That way he can be like the regular Wally somewhere else. He needs his own independence, because frankly, I really did not like him to begin with because he didn't resemble the original Wally. Like, yeah, I was like, yeah, another black character, we love it, but why isn't he like original Wally if you're gonna make a race change that's so drastic? But then they just didn't do anything with him when they brought the original Wally back. So there is a lot of potential with him, and I've had a really like painful opinion about him for so long. But you guys are right; you could do a lot with him. He's sort of like this splinter in the Flash family of like he's shoved between adult Wally and Bart. Now that Bart's back in the canon, but he still can be his own character if they do enough with him.
Well, and the thing about all of Jackson, Wallace, Duke, you know, these are all young black men who are being mentored by white men who don't really have any idea of what it's like to be them, and they can give them advice about what it's like to be a superhero and all of these other things, but they can't really give them life advice about, you know, what it's like to be them. And even like, you know, you don't have to bring in reality, you know, to a comic where it's just like a very special episode of Batman or whatever, but like you can do it where they're dealing with things that are personal to them and their community and their outlook and what they, I mean, even, you know, Aquaman can't tell Jackson anything about being black. He also can't tell him anything about being queer either, right? And like things that are going on in his specific community that might be upsetting him that like Arthur is oblivious to because he's not paying attention to that. Like he's not concerned with what's going on, but like Jackson is, because it's affecting him and it's upsetting him and like he wants to do something about it. So, you know, you even have those stories where it's like, yeah, you know, things are happening in Central City that Wallace is probably more keyed into than Wally or Barry, you know, and like he's looking to do something about those things, even how he feels about, you know, like his boss's police. So like how does he feel about that? You know, like there's a lot of other things that you could kind of get into and talk about. Just because, you know, like there's, oh well, he's like so and so but black, but black, there's a lot to dive into with that. Like, you know, our identities contain multitudes, right? Like we're not a monolith. There's a lot that you can take with being black, but there is also a lot of things that we have in common and like common struggles that we all go through, no matter, you know, our individual backgrounds or where we grew up or any of that other stuff. So like, you know, like you don't need to have a Duke, Jackson, Wallace super team, you know, where they're
that would be kind of dope.
I mean, they could hang out. They've got a lot in common, but like, you know, there's things that, you know, if you're going to create these characters, like you can't separate their blackness from their identity, right? Like that's still a central component of who they are.
Okay. Well, I feel like we've like gotten a lot of room here, and we've given a lot of shine to this book. I definitely want to say that from the first issue, this definitely has a lot of promise. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it. I don't know, but in general, this book was a great start. It feels like it was kind of cut off where it's gonna get good, which was obviously intentional. But I'm really excited for next month when the next issue drops and we can see where this goes from here. So I want to say thank you to the entire creative team of this book. Brandon Thomas has been sticking with this character since Future State, and thankfully he was able to continue with this story and build up to where he has it. But I want to say thank you to all the like the artists involved in this. I love that there's so many different takes in regards to the variant covers alone, where like show Jackson in so many different ways. That first cover, wow, wow, like the water detail on that first cover
Yeah.
was just off the hook. So in general, I'm really excited for what this book holds. Hold on a second. Let me get the credits up because I'm gonna feel like a dummy if I don't like give them the correct credit here. Hold on.
Yeah, shout them out.
Right, for real. Because Diego Olortegu, I think that's how I'm saying that. I might be saying that wrong, but you deserve all the credit in the world for the inside of this book because it just feels like a solid adventure, and you captured the energy of what Jackson is. Like I love you for that in these inner pages, but like just in general, like this book has a lot of promise. I'm really excited for what's gonna happen with this book. Like just like the entire interior just had me sold. Like I'll be flat out with that. The entire interior of the book had me just sold from jump. Give me a second. I have the entire thing right. I have the credits right here because like the interiors are great. Honestly, I don't usually shout out like inkers and colorists that much, but when it comes to this book, I expected like them to continue the trend they had been doing with Aquaman books, especially during Dan Abnett's run, where Atlantis was this like sort of darker tone because of the Aquaman movie. But like no, they were really good about having bright colors and like sharp lines here. So like I wow, just like Wade von Grombanger, I think that's spelled, and then Adriano Lucas on colors. Your colors are beautiful. Keep this up. I want to see this in issue 2 and onward. These colors were beautiful.
Yeah, I was trying to look up all the covers. Well, little videos popping up, but yeah, it's very beautiful. I know the one that I picked up yesterday was
the David Talaski cover. I think you have.
I just feel like it just spoke to me, and I just feel like it was just something about it that just kind of it was welcoming, and it was like showing Black men smile, showing Black men happy. And that's what I like too, because we always have that scowl on our faces when it comes to us being heroes or whatever.
Right.
But I really appreciated that cover because it was just showing him being carefree, as something that we want to be. We want to be free, carefree Black people. So nice to see that.
Now I will admit wholeheartedly that I bought the Kerry Randolph cover because I will buy anything Kerry Randolph makes because that man his artwork is amazing. And my Twitter profile is the Francis Vanderpool cover, but I definitely do agree that the art on display in like just that first cover, magic. Because like you're right, they try to show us as these darker, edgier characters, and even in Black Lightning, like Jefferson really wouldn't smile a whole lot as a hero, and that was kind of frustrating at times. But this first cover by David Talaski is just so magnificent in terms of like it looks like a painting. How well it looks! It looks like he painted this, and I love that there is like this potential where we can start seeing ourselves on covers and as title characters in mainstream comics. So props to all of y'all, and I can't wait to see what y'all got cooked up next because this book has a lot of promise. So first off, thank both of you for coming on the show. I'm excited for more opportunities to hang out with y'all on the show because there's still more topics and more ground to cover in regards to this. So thank you both for coming on the show, for real.
Yeah, of course, anytime.
Yeah.
And like, if y'all have anything y'all want to shout out, I know y'all are both like busting your ass with your own projects. Is there anything specific y'all want to shout out before we wrap up?
Jordan, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I can go ahead. I mean, I'm working on stuff right now. Nothing to announce at the moment, but hopefully stuff to announce soon.
Okay.
I guess if you just want to hear me talk more, I have a podcast called "White People Won't Save You," which is a podcast that dives deep into the insane world of white savior films. Each week we break down a different white savior movie, and then we reimagine it through a Black and POC lens with Black leads and or characters of color in the lead. So wherever you get your podcast at, so come and check us out.
All right, Victor.
Well, I'm one half of MEGASHEEN. Nick Porter is the other half, where we talk about gay and geeky things from a Black geek perspective. I'm currently working on the sequel to my first indie book, Strange Lore. We're doing Strange Lore Bonds, which I was very excited about. I had, luckily, I had Steens edited this book, so I was very excited about that. So right now, the artist Antonio Bandero is actually working on art, and artists, my heart goes out to you because you have to put up with people like me. Very nitpicky about every little thing, from the crease in shirts to the way the hair should lay on their face. My heart goes out to y'all because that's who I am. Very, very careful about things now. And I'm working on. I kind of finished it, but I'm going back through it and working through my first novel, my YA novel about Black witches and Black family of witches, including a Black queer character. But they're not called witches; they call something else because they are the originators of all of this. So, kind of really gotten into that world. Got great feedback about it. I'm writing it from the character's perspective. I wrote it in third person, but feedback was it's best to do this first person. So that's what we're doing right now.
All right, excellent. Well, I'm blown away. I didn't know that we're going that far with that. So I'm excited for this book now. But no, thank you once again, boys, for coming on the show. This is an amazing opportunity. We're going to definitely have more of these kind of talks because I love this dynamic and I want to see more of this happen. Folks, don't forget that you can listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you can listen to a podcast. Best believe you can find us, except for SoundCloud, because we don't support SoundCloud. And you can follow us on Twitter at PTP_podcast. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at On Comics Ground for all of your latest reviews, previews, and solicitations and more. We will be back next week with a brand new episode for you good folks. Mary and Travis will be here. But we wanted to do a special episode because Jackson matters a lot to me. And I wanted to bring some of these amazing gentlemen on here and talk about him because he doesn't matter to us. So I like, just in general, I want to see more of him, and I want to see more characters like him, and I know these fellows agree with me. So thank you so much, folks, for tuning in to this brand new episode. My closing statement, as always, is support your local comic book shop, whether it is through digital with the Legal Comic Geeks or Comic Hub or Comixology, where you can use their shop as a affiliate link. Do it. Like, just call your local comic book shop wherever they are. Like, just call them up tomorrow, ask them if they have a Comixology affiliate link, and try to get them support because you don't know how much longer comic book shops are going to be here. So, yes, there's amazing avenues that other creators are subscribing to, like Jordan spoke on, but the comic book shop still matters for a time left. So if you can support them, please still do so. Do either of you have a closing statement before we depart?
Support Jackson, I guess.
Reading
books with Jackson in it. My biggest thing, I hope one day that we do get a full Jackson series from a queer Black creator. I think that would be dope. I think that's definitely necessary to have that full representation behind the page, but also on the page. So one of these days, that's my biggest hope for the character, is that we get to see somebody, writing the character who reflects similar identities.
All right. Victor?
I agree. And support Black queer characters overall.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Like in general, we need more support. So most definitely do so. We're gonna go ahead and end this episode right here, folks. Thank you so much for listening to Panel to Panel. Peace out.